Hi everyone, Dr. Frunke here again with another knife review video. Today we're going to talk about the Spyderco Domino. The Spyderco Domino is a special knife to me because it was my very first Spyderco. I originally purchased the blue carbon fiber version. Unfortunately, I don't have that with me anymore and can't do a review on it. I found the Domino after a couple of years of being a relatively poor knife collector. I started out with some garbage, sort of gas station knives. I had a couple of Swiss Army knives growing up. I got a CRKT when I was in my young teens. I got a K-bar fixed blade at one point. And then when it came to purchasing knives for myself, the first one that I got was the CRKT M16 Tanto in titanium. I've already done a video on this. Check it out on my channel if you want to learn more about this great knife. But I was really impressed because at about $60 or $75 I was able to pick up a knife that had titanium in the handles. Unfortunately, what that did was spark an interest in knives in me that sort of snowballed into the collection that I have nowadays. I wanted a smaller knife because that knife was so big, but I also didn't want to compromise on the materials. I thought, I already have a titanium knife, why would I want to step backwards? So I started researching all the different titanium knives that were out there, and there were quite a few of them, but a lot of them were in price ranges that I simply couldn't afford at the time. The Sebenza was everyone's grail knife, but that one was $400 to $500. There were some custom knives out there, and companies like Zero Tolerance and Spyderco had started experimenting with titanium frame locks. At the time, Zero Tolerance was much more focused on the heavy-duty tactical knives. I did not really need one that was so aggressive, and so Spyderco became the next choice for me. Of course, I looked at more affordable options like the Delica, the Paramilitary, and I liked all of those knives. But again, I felt very strongly that I wanted a titanium knife. And that's what I found in the Domino. Now, at the time that it was released, the Domino was sort of a technological marvel and the cutting edge for what Spyderco was producing at that time. It was the second knife that they had ever made that had a flipper, the first being the Brad Southard. The Brad Southard knife also was on my radar, but it cost maybe $100 more money, and it was not very attractive to me. I didn't particularly like Brown G10, and I thought the blade was sort of a funny shape. Now, there are people out there that swear by the Southard and they say that it's one of the best knives ever. I have yet to hold one or use one, so I will refrain from commenting there, but I liked the way the Domino looked, so I picked it up. It shipped to me quickly. Again, it was the blue carbon fiber version. I found that that was available and got it right away. I did not and still do not particularly like the standard cubic check Bill Cosby carbon fiber pattern going on the standard model. But there are some aftermarket scales that are widely available, so if you want to save a buck, get the standard one and replace the scales for a new custom look. I liked the blue carbon fiber one. I carried it for well over a year. I put a blue titanium pocket clip on it, and it was the coolest knife ever, and it sustained me for a long time. As with most people, knife collecting habits sort of start out slowly. You get a knife and you like it for a long time. You get another knife, you like it for a long time, and eventually those intervals become shorter and shorter and shorter, and your wants in a blade become bigger and bigger and bigger. In any case, I had that knife for well over a year. I ended up selling it to make room in my collection for some other more expensive knives. I needed some money just to keep the circle of life going. and I immediately regretted selling that knife. Within a couple of weeks, I recognized that that was basically the most perfect everyday carry knife that had ever been made, and I wanted a new one. About a year later, I noticed that the red carbon fiber version had become available on various distributors, and I picked it up, and I was so happy. My initial impressions of the Domino, both the blue carbon fiber and later this red one, my first impressions were very, very positive. When you invest $200 in a knife or so, you want it to come in good condition, and boy oh boy it did. So right when you pick this up, you can feel the quality. It's got a solidity to it, a heft to it that you can just feel this thing has been put together by people who know what the F they're doing. All the materials looked really nice. The blade was clean. The satin grinds were perfect on this one, and on my other one there were no major imperfections in the machined satin in the blade. Sometimes that can be an issue in lower end production knives, inconsistencies in the grind patterns. All the carbon fiber was well done, and all the titanium was well done with no obvious visual imperfections. So definitely impressed right off the bat with the Domino. And then I started to analyze it a little bit further in terms of its different components. Starting with the blade, we have a 3.25 inch CTS XHP steel blade. CTS XHP is a powdered metal coming to us from Carpenter Steel that is chemically very similar to D2 steel. D2 is a tool steel frequently used in machining processes. It is very tough, and it can hold a very sharp edge. In making that chemistry powdered in this way, they added some chromium and they made it more stainless, but otherwise allowed the steel to continue to have the excellent edge achieving qualities and the toughness of the original D2. The way that they've ground this is beautiful. It's a full flat grind. They've left a machined satin on there. As I mentioned before, there really are no obvious imperfections in that. It's very nice. It holds up to wear and to cutting very well. No obvious marks in it. It's good for rust prevention as well. The blade is sliced through everything. I really haven't had to resharpen it or reprofile it on either of these knives, and it slices through simply everything. Now, it's not quite as big as, say, a Paramilitary 2, and it's a little bit bigger than the Native 5. Now, it sort of falls in between on the spectrum of these three knives, both in function and in price. I'm going to talk more about this Native 5 in another video. If you haven't checked it out already, I have a video on this M4 carbon fiber Paramilitary 2. Check that video out. I hope you enjoy it. But this knife falls right into a perfect size category between those two knives, where a Paramilitary might be a little bit too big and a Native might be a little bit too small. This has a 3.25 inch blade, but that's measuring from the pivot. The actual cutting length is somewhere closer to around 3 inches. And while that might be a problem for some people who need a longer knife, for most everyday cutting tasks, I found that that was perfectly adequate. To cut rope, to cut cloth, paper, cardboard, anything, you can cut it with this blade, no problem. Really, the only area of EDC where I found a 3-inch blade to be lacking was food prep, where a slightly longer knife is sometimes nice to have. But in those instances, I would simply use a knife that was suited for that task. So moving back from the blade, we talk about the pivot. This is a ball bearing pivot. It has a set of washers with some entrapped ball bearings in there, and it provides a very smooth opening and closing action. Honestly, there are very few knives that I've ever used or held that open and close as smoothly or as reliably as this. There are knives out there that have supposedly nicer ball bearing systems. This is the We Knife 605. This knife is recently produced from the Chinese company We Knives, and it has a multi-row ceramic ball bearing pivot system. It flies open well, but I'll tell you, the closure, you can sort of hear it, is not nearly as smooth as the Domino. So props to We Knives for making a unique product, but man, do they have some space to make up in terms of their fit, finish, and quality as compared to a Spyderco. So well done on the pivot here. Let's talk about the handle. The handle on this knife is the thing that sells this knife. I thought that the original cubic check carbon fiber was hideous, so I passed on the Domino initially. When the blue came out, I had to have it. It reminded me of a blue carbon fiber Bugatti, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And then when I realized after selling it that it was so cool and they had the red one, I bought the red one. So I think it's an eye catcher, but I just have to say I really don't like this peel plied carbon fiber that Spyderco does. Let's just be honest. If I wanted a carbon fiber knife, if I wanted carbon fiber on my knife handle, I want to buy a knife that has carbon fiber on the handle. Check out this. Spyderco makes knives with pure carbon fiber handle scales. Mentioned before, this Paramilitary 2 has carbon fiber through and through. It's not peel ply, it's a solid piece. You can see it on the inside there that it is a piece of carbon fiber that they've just textured on the outside. I like that a lot. And I don't really understand why Spyderco continues to make knives where all it is on the outside is a sheet, a single layer of this carbon fiber with a G10 scale in between. So this is not full thickness carbon fiber. This is not full thickness red weave carbon fiber. This is one layer thick carbon fiber that has been glued onto a G10 scale. And to be honest, that bugged me every single time I looked at the knife or held the knife. I just knew that it wasn't real. It was false advertising, and that frustrated me. I really just wanted it to be full carbon fiber, and I know that Spyderco has the ability to do that. So I'm wondering why on a $200 knife they bothered to put this cheap looking stuff on there. They might have been better to just leave this a plain titanium scale, made it a plain black G10 scale, or offered a couple of variations with one of them being a real carbon fiber scale for a little bit more money. Spyderco, I guarantee you that there will be people out there that will buy this in pure regular carbon fiber. If you made it, they will buy it, and they will buy it in big numbers because this is a great knife and everyone knows it. Let's talk about the things I love about the handle. Ergonomics. Eric Glesser designed this knife, as can be evidenced by his trademark symbol on the blade, his E. And he is just a master of knife ergonomics. He talks about ergonomics in every video that you can see him talking about knives, and it clearly is something that he knows well and he cares about when he designs a knife. The handle ergonomics here are second to none. There are no hot spots. It is a perfect organic shape that fits nicely in any hand. Small, medium, or large will be able to get a good grip on this. Open pillar construction with some nice back spacers going on here. A tubed lanyard hole for extra solidity there. And In adding to the high-tech features that this knife came with, including the flipper and the ball bearing pivot, this also has a steel lock bar insert with a built-in over travel stop. You can see on the far side of the lock there is a little area milled out of the handle. There's a little piece of steel that juts out. You can see it there from the frame lock insert that provides over travel stop assistance. The knife sits beautifully in between, the blade sits beautifully in between these handles with perfect centering. Most Spydercos I get are perfectly centered. Very rarely do I see one that is not. Especially in these products that are coming out of the Taichung, Taiwan factory. So some of you might only want to buy the Golden Colorado USA Earth knives, but let me tell you guys, this knife is really well made. And if any of the more recent knives coming out of Taichung, Taiwan, like this amazing piece, the Spyderco Nirvana, are any indication, Taichung, Taiwan produced knives are nothing to turn your nose up at. Definitely a well-made knife. Very, very high quality, very solid, and very well put together. You've got a nice stonewashed titanium on this side that I think holds up to wear very well. And I think that the titanium frame lock from this point on in my knife collecting became the primary knife of choice for me. This proved to me how nice it can be, how much fun it can be to have one of these types of knives. So titanium frame lock flippers, suddenly I had to buy more of them. Moving on to the clip, this comes with a standard Spyderco pocket clip. I will say I'm a bit confused by this clip on this knife. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. It's all black with a silver spider and black hardware. Now, no other place on this knife is there black hardware. This knife has all silver hardware. The blade is silver. There is a silver accent in the carbon fiber. There really isn't a lot of black on this knife, and I think that the black standard pocket clip is simply out of place on this knife. I think that a standard, maybe stainless steel in shiny steel would have been okay or better. Maybe more of a matte gray finish might have been okay to match the tumbled carbon fiber look here. Or even a different type of clip entirely. Maybe they could have integrated their wire clip into that screw back there. But it is what it is. When I owned this knife, I actually put a aftermarket pocket clip on there. The first time I owned the knife, I put a very similar looking pocket clip on there, but it was in blue titanium. And I thought that with the blue carbon fiber, it looked awesome. There aren't any red anodized titanium clips readily available on the aftermarket right now. So instead, I actually purchased this pocket clip from Blade for Sale on Amazon. It's actually labeled as a Domino pocket clip, lowrider pocket clip, and it looked awesome. I think you can imagine what that might look like on here with the silver accents, the silver blade, and the silver hardware. I enjoyed that. I ended up selling this knife to a good friend of mine. Thank you for letting me borrow this B-House. And I ended up taking the clip and keeping it for myself and putting it on my Paramilitary 2 that I purchased after this. So we've discussed all the different parts of the blade. Let's talk about how it functions in an everyday carry capacity. The knife works beautifully. It is an excellent everyday carry knife. The blade length is good for most cutting tasks. It is lightweight, comes in around 4.3 ounces or so, maybe a little bit less with the custom clip on there. It is thin, less than half an inch thick, fits in the pocket really nicely. A consideration that I always have is this geometry here. When putting this in the pocket, is this going to catch on my hand if and when I start taking stuff out of my pocket? And no, it doesn't. Now there's a little bit of width going on in this direction here, but that never really becomes too obtrusive. I think that for an everyday carry knife, there are very few knives out there that best this. I had a Benchmade 940. This beat it out hands down for daily use. Not because of the size, but just because of the way that it felt in my hands and the solid feel that I got from this as opposed to that knife. In conclusion, guys, I've rambled on for 20 minutes on this knife. I am a huge fan of the Domino. It was my first Spyderco. It was my first flipper. It was my first titanium frame lock flipper. And boy, oh boy, did it spark a fire in me. If you have not purchased a Spyderco Domino and you pride yourself on being a knife collector, if you're a Spyderco fan, if you like frame lock flippers at all, this is something worth picking up and having in your collection. It's usable, it's pretty, it works well, and I think that it shows that Spyderco is constantly trying to improve themselves and create a better product. Thank you guys for watching. This is Dr. Frunky. If you're enjoying these videos, please click like or subscribe, and I'll keep making more. Thanks. Take care.